Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be looking at um, Great Britain. Our lesson, Bring on the Brits, is going to take a deeper look at Britain prior to the Norman invasion in 1066. So we're going to backtrack a little bit to fill in some of the gaps on this society, this culture, and what was going on in Britain during the time of Charlemagne and all these other periods that we have studied. So today we're going to bring on the Brits. Well, let's start with an important distinguishing point, though. There is a group of people known as the Britons. The Britons, however, are not the British folks that we're going to be talking about mostly today. The Britons refer to a pre-Roman culture that existed on the British Isles. These people had been there forever and had established their own culture, and these Britons were those who were defeated by the Romans when the Romans invaded. The island, Great Britain, is named after these folks and was named that by the Romans. The Anglo-Saxons, who are our primary focus, are a group that migrated into Britannia, Great Britain, following the collapse of Roman power there. So Romano-British power is in decline. The Anglo-Saxons are arriving. And by 500s or so, the Britons had been forced from most of what is today Great Britain. The Britons had been forced. We can see that they're still in Wales. The area where I'm highlighting right there is an area of Great Britain known as Wales. But most of the rest of the southern half of the island is now under Anglo-Saxon control. Britons do continue to dominate the culture in some of these areas. Once again, Wales, and then also Cornwall down there. But mostly we're looking at an Anglo-Saxon period coming up. So let's look at kind of three phases of Anglo-Saxon history within Great Britain. The Anglo-Saxons, to begin with, are actually a blend of two German tribes, the Angles and the Saxons. They came from this area right over here, Anglia and the Saxon coast. But they are pretty much, once they're in Britain, they're going to focus as one united force. They are going to combine fairly early in this history, fairly seamlessly. They get along reasonably well. And as a united force, they are simply more than the Britons can handle. This is seen early on with the first Saxon raiders, and then later on when it's a full Anglo-Saxon force against the British simply can't stand up against them. And the British government collapses. What was left of Roman-influenced government ceases to exist, and the Anglo-Saxons are going to bring over their tribal system of government. Powerful kings who lead small kingdoms. In fact, early in the Anglo-Saxon period, there was as many as 35 kingdoms set up by the Anglo-Saxons, but that will whittle down by the Middle Anglo-Saxon period. As these raiders become farmers, and as they get a little bit more settled and they're there a little bit more permanently, they start to build larger kingdoms as marriages and conquests expand the power of a few of the kingdoms. The ones of greatest impact in the Middle Anglo-Saxon period were the kingdoms of Northumbria, the kingdom of Mercia, and a little bit later on, the kingdom of Wessex. Early on, really, it was the Northumbrians and the Mercians who held most of the power. These guys over here are also still Anglo-Saxon. This guy's still British. Now, these three kingdoms are going to fight with each other through centuries, really centuries, until Wessex is going to rise up to be the dominant of those three. This kind of enters into the late Anglo-Saxon period. The rise of Wessex was not just because Wessex was better organized or stronger than Northumbria or Mercia. It was also due to the fact that Northumbria and Mercia were more exposed to the attacks from the Norse. Northumbria and Mercia were facing toward where our Norse were coming from. So when the Norse first invade along the English east coast, it's going to be Wessex that's one of the last ones to be impacted by that. So Mercia and Northumbria are threatened by this. They collapse for a little while, then they kind of reconstitute themselves. There's a little back and forth there over about 100 years before the Anglo-Saxons finally do unite around the remaining powers in Wessex and do finally push the last group of Norse. There had been a few groups of Norse, but these were the Danes. And they finally pushed the Danes out in 1066. A little touch on Anglo-Saxon culture before we wrap this up. Anglo-Saxon kings really were warriors, and they were warriors who inspired other warriors to follow. And if they did not inspire those other warriors, then the other warriors didn't follow them. That was an overly simplistic version of it, but really that was kind of how it went. Anglo-Saxon kings who lost wars did not rule for long. It's important to note that the feudal system, as we have discussed it, did not develop here. Certainly, these kings had kind of their chief followers. They called them earls. And the title of earl will later roll into the feudal system and have more meaning for us. But in this period, these were kind of like their chief guys, the most trusted leaders, the ones who might lead a war band of their own. But these kings were really just warriors with a few close followers, and they all followed each other because they would have plunder in war, and it was in their best interest to be on the winning side. Also culturally, Anglo-Saxons, it's worth noting, were pagans. They brought pagan practices across from Saxony and ruled as pagans at first. But they will eventually convert to Roman Catholicism as they see the power of the church, the influence of the church, and they see the success of the church in controlling many aspects of society. They realize wisely and rightly that they could use this for their own ends, and they do. And this is how the Anglo-Saxon conversion eventually brings Christianity more widely to the island, and how they really work together on this. Quickly before we leave, it's worth noting, and it's important to know, that Anglo-Saxons lose control of English government in 1066. This is a part of the Norman invasion. When William the Conqueror crosses the English Channel from his Duchy of Normandy, when he crosses that channel from the Duchy of Normandy and invades England, they take over the government. Norman rulers will then take over the country. They'll establish feudal rule. They'll bring in dukes, and they'll call their counts earls in tradition of England, and barons. All of those people come over. They're all Frenchmen, though. They're all from Normandy. William the Conqueror is going to reward his followers with English lands. So we have Normans, French Normans, ruling over an Anglo-Saxon population. The people are still Anglo-Saxon, and they still see themselves as Anglo-Saxons. Many British today still trace their heritage to the Anglo-Saxons and see that as who they are. So that is our look at the British and our lesson, Bring on the Brits. And we're going to look a little bit more at English government following the Norman conquest next time.